Hey, welcome to Valor and Hope, where we cut through the noise and dig into the facts. I'm Greg, an Iraq war veteran committed to progressive change. It's time to stand up, speak out, and take action for the future we deserve. Let's make that happen together. So I completed a video on DEI, and I decided to wait until the Trump administration came into power to publish it. It turns out, unfortunately, that was a wise decision because there have been a lot of new developments that I need to address that weren't in that video. Let's start with an explanation about what DEI is. DEI stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. DEI initiatives promote the fair and equal treatment of all people, including white men, in the hiring process and through employment. It can be traced back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited employment discrimination based on race, color, sex, religion, and other criteria. I've seen some people argue that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, plus the Americans with Disabilities Act, plus the Age Discrimination in Employment Act already make it illegal to discriminate, therefore DEI is unnecessary. So all we need to do is consider merit with hiring and promotions and everything will be fine, right? Well, unfortunately, this argument overlooks the gap between having a law on the books and ensuring actual compliance in real-world situations. In other words, making something illegal doesn't magically prevent it from happening. People can still engage in discriminatory behavior, whether intentionally or unintentionally, despite legal prohibitions. I should note here that discriminatory behavior doesn't have to be conscious and intentional. All humans have unconscious biases. I do, you do, and everyone else in this nation does. It's impossible to be free from all bias. This is where DEI frameworks come into practice. Let's consider a hypothetical hiring scenario. Your hiring manager is a black male who went to Howard University, an HBCU. Prior to attending Howard, he was born and raised in Virginia. You've applied for a role as a software developer on his team, and you've made it to the interview stage. Congratulations. You are a white male from Kansas who attended the University of Kansas. Unbeknownst to you, the other applicants include a white woman who went to a state university in California, another black male who is also from Virginia and also attended Howard University, and an Asian woman from Wisconsin who attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison. All candidates, including you, have undergraduate degrees in computer science. In this scenario, unconscious biases would make the hiring manager most likely to prefer the black male who went to Howard University. The biases at play here include affinity bias, which is when we prefer candidates who share characteristics with us, in-group bias, which is where people who have the tendency to favor their own group above others, the halo effect, which is where our first impression of a person's qualities is based on one positive first impression, in this case, shared race and alma mater, gender bias, where men are perceived as more competent in computer science roles than women, confirmation bias, as the manager likely perceives Howard University more positively than those that he didn't attend, and perception bias, as the hiring manager may perceive the candidate from Howard as just fitting better with our culture at this company. So in this scenario, DEI frameworks would have attempted to educate the hiring manager about his unconscious biases and given him the awareness and tools to attempt to correct them. So when white men think that DEI doesn't do anything to advance them, consider a scenario like this to see how it absolutely does, because in this scenario, they would have been overlooked likely for the black male candidate. Now, additionally, I would be a DEI hire. I'm a veteran. I am well aware of the fact that veterans tend to bring a strong work ethic, leadership skills, adaptability, teamwork, discipline, integrity, and a sense of commitment to the workplace. Veterans can excel at managing teams, punctuality, adapting to rapidly changing environments, making quick decisions in high-stress situations, and more. The federal government also recognizes this because they offer veterans 5 to 10-point hiring preference for federal jobs based on that veteran's particular status. So technically, removing DEI means this 5 to 10-point preference for veterans must also be removed. But that's not the point I'm trying to make here. Civilians with no military experience might not be familiar with what we bring to the table, having never served themselves. DEI framework would point hiring managers to the unique skills that veterans bring to the table, not in such a manner to unfairly hire them over civilians, but so that those skills could be given fair consideration in the hiring process. In addition, I'm 40 years old, the age at where age discrimination protections are guaranteed by law. But that doesn't mean a hiring manager is going to be free from their age-related biases. If I put my age on my resume and there are other candidates in their early 20s who put their ages on their resumes, mine could easily be weeded out by someone who's looking for younger candidates, even though that would be illegal. So if you think DEI doesn't affect you now, it might not. But no one is immune to aging, and at some point we're all going to have to contend with potential for age discrimination. When I brought this point up to someone on Reddit, his response was this. Quote, "If my age disqualifies me from a position, why shouldn't I be kicked out? If someone younger, faster, and more efficient than me can be used to perform the same task better, then on what grounds should I be kept?" End quote. My response was to tell him that many people 40 or older are perfectly capable of completing the job they're applying for or are already incumbent in. His response was, quote, "If you're not as good at your job as your replacement, then you shouldn't be in that position anymore. Full stop." End quote. So I cited the Age Discrimination in Employment Act and how it makes this line of thought illegal. His response, quote, "Sounds like a dumb law. If a part of my car stops working as well as it could, do I put up with that until it fails completely? No, I get that replaced." End quote. Now, obviously, this person could easily be a troll, but I want to use this as an example of how DEI protects people from this line of reasoning. I don't consider myself to be less capable than a 20-year-old at performing my job. In fact, I consider myself to be more capable. I have 20 years of experience in the workforce. I have my full mental faculties. And I have a master's that's directly related to my line of work. DEI frameworks would support this and reinforce that to hiring managers and to employers about my qualifications. In the example I gave earlier, we were at the interview stage. Now I'd like to take a step back and talk about getting there to the interview stage. To get as many interviews as an Anglo applicant with an Anglo-sounding name, an Indigenous person must submit 35% more applications. A Chinese person must submit 68% more applications. An Italian person must submit 12% more applications. And a Middle Eastern person must submit 64% more applications. Marianne Bertrand and Sendil Mullainathan conducted a study where they sent resumes in response to help wanted ads in Chicago and Boston newspapers and measured the number of callbacks those resumes received for interviews. They randomly assigned white-sounding names such as Emily Walsh or Greg Baker to half of those resumes, and very black-sounding names such as Lakeisha Washington or Jamal Jones to the other half. The resumes were identical in qualifications. The only differences were the names. Bertrand and Mullainathan found that the resumes with white-sounding names received 50% more callbacks than the resumes with African-American sounding names. But it's not just about race. Although the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed more than 30 years ago, 38% of working-age people with disabilities are employed, compared to 80% of those without disabilities. Of those working-age people with disabilities, those with autism experience even lower rates of employment. Studies indicate that many organizations have yet to recognize the advantages that a neurodiverse workforce offers to both their employees and the organization as a whole. Yet, creating a robust diversity climate has proven beneficial for both employees and organizations, offering a competitive edge to companies. This competitive edge comes from increased organizational effectiveness, job involvement and job satisfaction, and lower amount of turnover. Unfortunately, it's common for organizations not to recognize neurodiversity as a form of diversity, but DEI frameworks would help educate employers about this type of diversity. This is important because estimates show that 15 to 20% of our population is neurodiverse. This means that depending on how many children you have, the likelihood that one of your immediate family members is neurodiverse becomes higher and higher. The average family size in America is 3.15 people. For a family of 3, there's about a 50% chance that one of its members is neurodiverse. I grew up with 2 parents and 2 siblings, a family of 5. That means our family had a 67% chance that one of its members was neurodiverse. If you have 2 parents with 4 children, it's almost a 75% chance. DEI frameworks would support educating employers about the benefits that group of people brings to the workforce. And gender still comes into the picture too. When the state government of Victoria in Australia trialed anonymized recruiting for 2 years, it discovered overseas-born job seekers were 8% more likely to be shortlisted, women were 8% more likely to be shortlisted and hired, and applicants from lower socioeconomic suburbs were 9.4% likelier to progress through the selection process and receive a job offer. According to academics researching the trial at the Victorian Department of Treasury and Finance, we found that before de-identifying CVs, men were 33% more likely to be hired than women. After de-identification, this flipped and women were 8% more likely to be hired than men. In this case, DEI frameworks would provide employers with guidance about being mindful that men and women are hired at more equal rates. No framework would say that an unqualified woman should be hired over a more qualified man, just that awareness should be given to the fact that men are more likely to be selected than women are. And for those that think that racism and biases are gone from America, studies show companies openly committed to diversity are as likely to discriminate as those who aren't. This shouldn't be understood as DEI being broken or pointless. Rather, it should be understood that DEI is that much more important. Because it's one thing to say you're not racist and you're open to diverse perspectives, but it's another thing entirely to understand those biases that I've addressed in this video and how to correct for them. Unfortunately, we're now at the point where the American government is lying to its people about DEI. Trump, Vance, and Trump's press secretary have all made the claim that the recent airplane vs. Black Hawk crash happened due to DEI. Again, I should note here that DEI does not advocate for hiring unqualified people over qualified people because of their race, sex, etc. But with air traffic control, that's one job where it's actually legal to discriminate against age. To be an air traffic controller, you can be no older than 31 years old before the closing date of the job posting. DEI would suggest that that's age discrimination, and that an alternative to that could be ongoing validated assessments of job performance proving someone in their 50s is still capable of doing the job. But in reality, there was one controller who was responsible for watching 2 towers. That's why it happened. Trump's federal hiring freeze isn't going to relieve ATC's staffing issues. He's also gutted the Aviation Security Advisory Committee days before this unfortunate crash occurred. According to AP, this means the committee no longer has any members to inspect safety issues at airlines and airports. Now, did this hiring freeze and the gutting of the advisory committee cause this crash? No, of course not. But it's not going to help with ensuring this doesn't happen again. Instead, Trump blames the conservatives' favorite boogeyman, DEI. I'm not surprised, because this is an unserious administration who's more committed to stoking culture war fires than they are to uniting our country and actually investigating what contributed to this tragic event. Trump's press secretary also lied further about the selection process for air traffic controllers. Let's watch what she says here.
If you are an American who has spent many years studying aviation and you graduate from school and you're an air traffic controller based on skill and merit, and then you apply for a job and you're forced to fill out a biographical questionnaire asking you the color of your skin and asking you where you're from in details that aren't relevant at all to the job description, I think that deteriorates the morale of people in this industry. When you are flying on an airplane with your loved ones, which every one of us in this room has, do you pray that your plane lands safely and gets you to your destination, or do you pray that the pilot has a certain skin color? I think we all know the answer to that question.
So she compares somebody who's graduated from school with qualifications to be an air traffic controller based on their own skill and merit, but says that person would be forced to fill out a biographical questionnaire asking them the color of their skin and their national origin, which is irrelevant to the job description. Now, I agree with her that this information is irrelevant and shouldn't be included in hiring decisions, but that's not what the federal government is doing. First, the biographical questionnaires used by the federal government are voluntary, not mandatory. Second, the federal government specifically states that the data used by those questionnaires are not used for hiring purposes. Rather, they're used to determine who their recruiting efforts are reaching. Now, I did find some job postings on USA Jobs attempting to hire disabled air traffic controllers, but those postings specifically stated that those disabled individuals must have the necessary competencies and experience to do the job duties. So in other words, even there, they aren't going to be hiring incompetent or inexperienced people simply because they're disabled. I'm not surprised that the Trump administration's press secretary is already lying to the American people, and I expect we'll continue to see far more lies in the next 4 years. Since the Trump administration has been taking down all of its pages related to DEI, I screen recorded all the pages supporting my claims about their lies regards to these hiring processes and have those superimposed over this video. It's unfortunate that the MAGA movement is so opposed to DEI, especially when you consider how many of them would benefit from it. If you're still not convinced about that, let me give you one more argument. By 2045, white people are expected to be minorities. If you think that you or your kids may still be in the job market at that time, DEI would be doing more to benefit you and your children by, again, informing hiring managers that no longer look like you about their unconscious biases. I'm also more convinced than ever that racism is still alive and well in our nation, because the reaction to DEI makes it quite clear to me that white people have come to the understanding that minorities are trending towards majorities and that we're no longer going to be on top of the world in America. So instead of ensuring everyone has fair treatment, ourselves included, they're ready to burn it all down so white folks can continue to be on top. I'm really at a loss as to how to continue over these next 4 years. I think the best thing I can do is continue to share my perspective as a veteran to all of you and hope that you find some value in it. And if you're somebody that this impacts, I hope you can find some solace in the fact that at least there are some people that support you, unlike our government. Thanks for watching Valor and Hope. If you found this content valuable, please like, subscribe, and share with others that want to make a difference. The fight for justice is never over, even if it seems like it is. But together we can keep pushing forward. Stay strong, do your best to stay hopeful, and I'll see you in the next video.